statute here. Who is that?
That's Francis Pierpont, father of West Virginia. Good afternoon, everyone. I think she started. Welcome to People's University. No, start up. Let me rewind that. Welcome to Lunch with Books, and this is also the Wheeling Poetry Series. If you would turn off your cell phones now. Come to order, class, please. Come to order now. Thank you. If you haven't seen the new People's University on climate change, the brochures are in the back. You can take one upon leaving. Next week, in this slot, July 25 at noon, Manami Kawazoe, who was here for several programs having to do with the Japanese Outreach Initiative at West Liberty University. She's returning for her final program, and she'll teach us some Japanese for travel. So that'll be next week. And in 2 weeks, Goosetown Memories. So that should be a big crowd, because a lot of people have fond memories of Goosetown, which no longer exists, of course, and that will be August 1. So I thought I'd mention a couple of the literary programs coming up. On September 5th, we have a graphic novel program that Mark Harshman will be involved in. It's a panel discussion of a book called Here, which is just an amazing book. Mark will be part of the panel, along with Danny Boyd, who's a graphic novel writer. Dr. Cummings, you may remember her from our Ancient History series. Marie Cummings, she will be on the panel. She's an archaeologist. And Luke Novel, who's a local comic book artist, will also be part of that. And then on September 9th, so that's part of the Wheeling Read series, we'll have the finale. Jennifer Haig will be in this room. We'll have a poetry workshop with Allison Bettini Davis, a young adult prose workshop with Nora Shalloway Carpenter. Remember Scott Shalloway? It's his daughter. And she's now an established writer. And Cheryl Harshman will do at least I think she will do an art workshop, I'm pretty sure. Okay. And then the next poetry series installment is with Jeff Worley, who was scheduled previously. He'll be here, and Mark will tell you more about that, but he'll be here on October 10th. And now to introduce our guests for today's program, I give you the organizer of the Wheeling Poetry Series, new poet laureate, Mark Harshman.
Thanks, John. Again, I always feel like I should start by saying you all don't know how lucky you are to be here in Wheeling with such a superb library and Sean arranging all these magnificent programs. Tuesday after Tuesday and some other days as well. It's just, believe me, nothing else much like this happens nearby. It's a great gift you give to us, Sean. And this, the Wheeling Reads program is coming up in early September. That's magnificent. Some of these, Miss Hay is a magnificent writer, and we'll be privileged to have her here. And then for the Wheeling Poetry Series, yes, October 10th, Jeff Worley is coming, and he is, I can't say enough, make sure you come out. He's a lot of fun. You don't get to always say that about poetry, and he's a great reader, and he has become a friend. And he's the past poet laureate of Kentucky. So it'd be good to have Jeff here, especially since because of COVID, we've not seen each other. So let me begin. Oh, October 10th, if that's a Tuesday anyway. So, yeah. Well, to begin, let me introduce Lori Wilson. Lori and I keep crossing paths, sharing mutual friends, and yet never getting much of a chance to visit. But I'll take this reading as another happy opportunity to deepen our relationship. Lori's the author of 2 poetry collections, The Dream Women Called from 2021, just a year or 2 ago, and House Where a Woman, 2009, both from Autumn House Press. It's a truly great publisher. Her poems have appeared in the anthologies Along These Rivers, poetry and photography from Pittsburgh, and the working poet. She's a graduate of the Drew University MFA Program in poetry. She's received a Mid-Atlantic Foundation Creative Fellowship at the Virginia Center for the Arts, Virginia Center for Creative Arts, and since 2007, she's been a part of the Madwomen in the Attic creative writing workshops at Carlow University in Pittsburgh, including 10 years as a teacher. She lives in Morgantown, where she works as a software developer. And just for a little tease to let you know what you're in for, let me, if you don't mind, Lori, I'm going to read an excerpt, the final stanza of your poem, In Annapolis and the Dare. It was the summer of the bicentennial. My boyfriend didn't visit, and back home, the family dog died. That alone should be enough to keep us intrigued. It goes on, though. I dipped my cupped hand with the rest into bright summer days, their hands filled with sapphires, mine with slippery silt, as if I'd been tricked. I was never alone. I was always alone. And that summer, a rough stone began to rub raw a hollow inside me. Folks, you're in for a treat. It's my pleasure. Please welcome to Wheeling, Lori Wilson.
How's that? Good sound? Okay. Yes. Oh, thank you, Mark, so much for that introduction. It's nice to be reminded of that poem. I thought about that. I'm very happy to be here. I'm so impressed with your library. It's really wonderful. Our Morgantown library is very nice, but it's not this. So the fact that you had an auditorium, I was like, whoa. Okay. Anyway, I'm really happy to be here reading with you, or to you. So I'm just going to start with a poem called The Well. I was born without a meadow, no grass hid, no red-winged blackbird skimmed a path, no grass lay flattened by wind. If inside me was a well, I didn't know it. I walked on cracking ground, expecting thorns. Rocks cut my feet. I slipped in mud. I ran, unsteady, ran. In driving rain, in snow, on roads, around the cars, the sidewalks icy. Inside me was a well I couldn't find. I had no center, only wobble, rock, and catch. Two sparrows on the porch wall pecked at scattered seeds, their rhythmic dip and rise held steady in the wind. I ran, kept running. How I wanted to sink into cradle of hip, hinge of knee. How I wanted to fall over the well lip and down, clear to the bottom, and lean against the muscle of that throat. This next poem is a height of the summer poem, and is from my neighborhood. On White Avenue, a maple leaf drifted to the broken sidewalk. You know the place, past the school where AA meets now. But before the crest of the hill, before the road narrows so only one car can pass at a time. It was 93 degrees. Everything that could grew a green riot along that road when this single leaf fell. Along its veins, yes, still bright green, but yellow taking over toward the edge, brown spot widening on one lobe, though the leaf remained supple and glistened as if sprinkled with its own sugar. I couldn't say if it was sweet. I didn't touch it with my tongue. Even now, on my bed, as it curls its increasingly papery skin, flecks of light, here on a vein, here where brown is a pond in a yellow field, here where one tip begins to bleed red. Oh, thank you, that's so nice. This poem goes back to my childhood. It's a lot of memories from there, but it's not exactly biographical, so you can just think about your childhoods. When to wake is to head down a road over which an unpredictable wind raises such dust I can't breathe, and sky through grit is a face drained of color. I want to return to the dream where color figured, even if no one spoke, even if I didn't move. There was a room with white walls, perfect corners, each angle exact, and straight lines where walls met not only each other, but also the ceiling and the red pine floor. On two walls, a window with raised wooden sash, fine screen. On a third, a door with glass knob, brass hinges. On the floor, skeins of embroidery floss, wrappers already slid from the thread, sunflower, magenta, silver, turquoise, unfolded colors still kinked but untangled, radiating from gold paper cylinders piled a cobbled sun in my lap. Some slide under the door. Some climb the wall to a window screen's mesh of needle eyes pulling them through. I remember the feel of that thread, dividing strands, wetting them in my mouth, poking until the needle accepted them, linen yielding to its point, in and out 100 times. I love thee more than yesterday, less than tomorrow. My grandmother's tablecloth, embroidered with grapes, purple silk under my fingers, calming in the chaos of smoke, loud talk, heady smells, turkey, butter, black coffee, olives. The whole family crowding my grandparents' apartment on Peeble Street. Silver spoon against a china cup, ice in a glass, strike of a match. Was it there that I learned to leave my body, grounded only by stitches I rubbed with my fingers, while I hovered from ceiling, windowsill, doorway, watching, not only my grandfather, cigar waving to make a point, my father shouting, my grandmother hiding a smile with her hand, but also the child distracted, her food untouched, her fingers' rhythmic motion. In the white-walled dream world, gleaming threads lie untangled, and I know I could choose any one and follow. Color drawing me out of the room, the house, my ordinary life. I lift one strand, feel the familiar silk, but that's all. From outside the window, swirling dust clogs the screens and dulls the fluttering threads. It gets harder to make out the girl sitting cross-legged on the red pine floor. Harder still to remember she held the beginning of something bright. I have 4 grown children scattered across this country and across the ocean also. So this is a poem about a mother and daughter, and the title of it comes from the painting by Georgia O'Keeffe, Canna, Red and Orange. Driving Route 7, I read the postcard from my daughter, pinning it to the steering wheel with my thumb, glancing back and forth from asphalt bend to fire and tongue. Even this small, O'Keeffe's flower flames and folds, both burn an invitation to descend beyond heat, deep into the center my daughter craves. for which she quits school, for which she combs this wide country she's been crossing. She's 20, scraping by. Santa Fe is 1,700 miles from home. The refrigerator is a collage of postcards mailed along the way. Beauty, adventure, yes, but also scribbled in margins, infection, lost shoes, an unexpected snowstorm, her car, the bicycle rack, backed into a truck. If what I feel is more envy than worry, do I love her less? The painting's green upper corners quicken O'Keeffe's flower, as though wind might lift its red petals, the way the sudden green of coltsfoot pulls my eyes to the side of the road. I turn on the wipers to dislodge a dry leaf, last year's brittle leaf, briefly freed. My daughter writes, I'm beginning to feel lighter. I hope you too are taking in light. I find life in a year, or sometimes in a month, or in a week, or in a day, is a braid of sorrow and joy, and also of emptiness and fullness. The next few poems I'm going to read kind of travel the folds of that braid, I guess. This next poem, the title of this next poem comes from the poem Winter Thirst by Gerald Stern. And it's a line from that poem. And what the void was like. What I feared. Being abandoned, deserted, no, vacant, as in tenantless. Having never been filled, inhabited, lived in, taken up. The missing floorboards, how to cross, therefore, how to get up in the morning, while outside the milkweed pods swelling and bursting. Weightless, as in to walk down green to the bridge, to the river. For that, I needed the sidewalk's grab, else out of control. Lacking, without, no, less than lonely loss, rather null, the empty set. Tunneling into cotton or dust, there was nothing to push against. I was so thirsty. On Spruce Street in downtown Morgantown, there's a church. Actually, there are many churches in downtown Morgantown. But one day walking past the Spruce Street church, I saw this sign, you know how they can change the letters on the signs in front of the church. Anyway, it said, empty is good, which struck me as a bit odd. So this poem. Empty like a dishwasher ready for loading, or empty like a cupboard and the paycheck spent. Empties the flattened box in the trash, the boarded house on Kingwood condemned, roof a sluice, yard a sea. I mean echo, hollow, a hike on a freeway at night hauling a red plastic can. Empties the bed where grief sleeps. Bag without ballast, easily pierced by a twig, in the end, empty caves in. If I tell you I'm empty, I'm telling you feed me. And when I say feed me, I really mean stay. Make of your broad back a shield. Hold me up with your practical hands. I'm all out of muscle, vision, grit. Stay. I have a lot of poems that the title sort of works as the first line, so when I'm getting to those, I'm just going right into the poem. So if you feel like they're not titled, they sort of are, but when I saw the pink and purple tractor trailer, I remembered the world outside my body. On Park Street, I thought, if I could pull up this kind of delight from the dirt through the soles of my feet, I'd never wear shoes. Broken, bone flowing to bind the brakes, how long this body has stood. Eyes blue, all the records say, hair brown, streaked gray. This too is true. For 40 years, I wanted to be other. She wears a bowler hat and climbs a mountain. I have coveted breasts, shoulders, legs, hair, teeth, brains, husbands, and houses. In black ink, I write, I want to be seen, take up space, break the window. Okay. I visited a daughter in Portland, Oregon, in November 2016, right after the presidential election. And this poem is set in the Smith and Bybee wetlands. Refugium. November, and the brightest things my neon blue slicker. I wish I knew if the pulsing in the soggy leaves came from Pacific chorus frogs or bullfrogs. Either way, something other than fear is born in those throats. Downtown, a man gets out of his car, fires a gun at the sky, then another man's leg. Here, the lake's so still, I think nothing's there until a single duck upends, then another, then one here, two there, diving. Moss climbs ash trees caged in wire against the beavers. Lichen stripes red alder trunks. Grasses, sedge and rye, green, red, yellow, nearly white, tangle. And the Union Pacific hugs the Columbia River. Boxcars tagged Lost Angel or Anew, bold colors, worth the risk of spraying paint in the dark. If you do it right, your piece can run for years all across the country. Everything pushes against something, elbows its way. The water-logged clouds, lake at the muddy shore, reed canary crowds the native grass, and this refugium's been dredged, diked, filled, clear-cut, dammed. Downtown, someone smashes a windshield, and I don't know what's wild or tame. I only know the frog song is endless. My mother died a little over 20 years ago. So unfortunately, she wasn't alive when I got to all the phases of my life that would have let me understand her and who she was. So there was a lot I didn't understand about my mother, a lot I didn't know, and I'm still trying to figure out. But I understand it better the more years I live. My mother comes to me. When the white fox came, it was August, air shimmered. She watched from the edge of the yard, waited, turned away. If my mother came to me then, I didn't know her. When the waxwings came, it was winter and morning, sun still low, so it lit the white page on my desk. A letter to me, her writing, dear daughter, words I could read. Still, I didn't know her. This next poem was inspired, I guess, by a photograph of the sculptor Louise Bourgeois by Annie Leibovitz. And it's titled My Mother as Sculptor in black and white. She's shutting me out. Maybe she doesn't mean to, but she's turned away. Her left eye squints from under a folded lid, a sparse, wiry eyebrow. A silver-streaked mane flows down from her crown, from a face that's shrunken as if she's drawn into herself, bones grown small for her skin, which is a map, spotted, parched, crazed with lines. Even if thin lips pressed and muscle, a rope in the neck, signify only sharp focus and not disapproval. The point is, she doesn't see me. Her right hand, raised shoulder height, is open. Fingers curved toward the palm, toward me, fixed, intentional, thumb flexed, wrinkles at the joint concentric circles on a lake. She's ready to catch, or she just let go, wet clay or a rock. Taut tendons follow her forearm, from bunch sleeve to wrist, the shirt cuff worn to holes. She's not tired exactly, more deliberate. Maybe the fingers, arthritic, won't straighten, and nights she rubs arnica into the wrist. I wish I could see what she sees. I want to put a green pear in that hand. Okay, last mother poem. My mother got a lot of things wrong. Excuse me. My mother got a lot of things wrong. But when I was a kid and afraid I'd swallowed a straight pin, she didn't laugh. She helped me make a plan, something to do with eating bread to coat the pin, then visiting Dr. Hoffmeister. So that's something. I can't say I loved her, but there was that straight pin thing, and the time she bought paint so I could make a mural on my wall. Also, the smocked christening dress for the baby, and a few other things I've had 20 years to remember. I don't believe in an afterlife, and yet I say the owls and foxes in my dreams are her. Maybe the red wool coat I tried on at Goodwill was hers. I rub oil of Olay into my skin just to smell her, and wear her pearls to feel one small weight she lifted, fight the fishhook clasp she fastened behind her neck. I have to just check where I am. Okay, I have two more poems. A few admissions. I'm trying not to lie anymore. Mostly, I speak less. It'd be easier if I could be sure of the truth. Today, I'm the gutter sagging across the street, not quite enough. Maybe a bird's nest, maybe a plot of wet leaves weighed it down. Below it, the wind has swept a small pile against the yellow curb. The mailman shuffles envelopes pulled from his bag, slides them into the box. I like to imagine they're letters, not bills. I had this idea to pick up a seed or a stone or a leaf on each daily walk, set it on the table, maybe sketch it, maybe even in color. I'm trying to get closer to truth. So far, I haven't picked up anything. Last night, I was trying to remember the music I'd loved on Chestnut Ridge. I didn't want to make up that story, and filled my living room with Mozart, Copland, Gershwin, the shock of it in the silence, the sudden urge to bow down. I always went back to the same place, downhill and up past the shed, left and left where the logging road forks, right at the meadow, the path's steep drop. When I found it again, I scrambled half-slid to the flat, pushed through rhododendron to stone and light, the river a ribbon below. I lay down and pressed my bare back against heat. I always return to the same place, wanting what? This certain light, these red tails drifting, this pair of box turtles, corydalus growing from a crack in the rock. I went back. I liked best to see no one. I went back for the full moon rise, and when days cooled so the rattlers sought sun in the path, I went back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you very much. And please note both poets have copies of their books for sale today, so please come up afterwards. Also a pleasure to welcome David Prather here to read for us this afternoon. Dave has his MFA from Warren Wilson College, perhaps the finest MFA program in the United States. He was poetry editor for Tantra Press and Confluence magazine and has taught at West Virginia University Parkersburg, as well as at Marietta College in Marietta, Ohio. After studying acting at the now defunct National Shakespeare Conservatory in New York, he spent almost 2 decades performing and directing at the Actors Guild of Parkersburg, where he garnered several local awards. He also appeared in 2 independent movies, Christ Complex and White Zombie. Dave has also worked as a Pony Express courier, a parking lot attendant, a movie rental cashier, an administrative assistant, and a retail store manager. These are all requirements for becoming a poet. I hope you all realize this. His almost newest poetry collection is We Were Birds, Main Street Rag Press, 2021, and coming out later this year or early next is his book Shouting at an Empty House, also Main Street. Sheila and the Gig, excuse me. If Dave will permit me, I'm going to share a couple excerpts from his poem Humidity, which was published in Still magazine. He refers here to what I know as bergamot or bee balm as Monarda, and he writes, Monarda flares in the field, butterfly weed trembles by the road, grasses along the chain link fence weave their way upward. Paradise has its limit, but what those are may never be known. Each second belongs to the passion of another. If I find my way home, there will be no sleep. Tangle my wicked body with dreams. These are the kind of images and ideas that get under my skin, make me want to read more, and in today's fortunate case, hear more. Please welcome Dave Prather.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to take a quick drink here before I get started, if that's okay. Look at all you wonderful people out there. I think I'm going to start with a poem that, when I was in Warren Wilson, one of my mentors was Tony Hoagland, a wonderful writer. He passed away, I think, in 2017 or 18 from cancer. 20 years after I'd studied with Tony, he sent me an email, basically on his deathbed. And he said, David, send me that poem that I can't get out of my head. So I thought, you know what, in honor of Tony, I'm going to read that poem first. If I can find it. Yes. A test for the rational mind. Dimphna, daughter of mental illness, the body is filled with doubt, the sickness and pleasure of an unrecorded existence. This is the habit and behavior, the hand that gathers pebbles and hides them in pockets with loose bits of thread, where they gather worry like nerves seared by anxiety, depression, obsession, the moods of reality. This is the inability to think of anything but the locks of windows and doors, the temperature of the oven, the last drop of water from the kitchen faucet, going back to flush the empty toilet because of the germs, you know, the invisible death. There is no telling, but theory travels anywhere, an airborne disease that causes people to pull free from the chrysalis of the sheets and walk in their sleep, doubling the efforts of the day and things believed undone. Or epilepsy, rolling the eyes and biting the tongue like that young man in high school who kept falling to the floor as though possessed by the devil. Or any of the unnumbered and unnamed demons who just can't seem to wear the body, twisting and spitting and gurgling to pull on the flesh, then giving up. At least this is what everyone assumed watching him spin, hinged to the floor, stuck there by a force we had never understood. Perhaps I take this for granted. Perhaps it was only me who had no capacity for reason, filtering the world through the senses, letting the rest get tangled into a gray filament to fill the head, the coiled ball of the brain. Surely this is wrong, hallucination or delusion, the biochemical induction of the world. This is chronic, a repetition of the illogical that strikes even at the cellular level, ripping through the chromosomes, a government sanction, so that the mutation is irreversible, irrevocable, and you are something entirely new, and you keep going. Sworn to this knowledge that one day the bones will be translated, laid in place, given their proper names, making remarkable cures, giving you over to a history you don't deserve. I will stretch it out and release the pinched and strangled arteries to whisper their broken down nutrients into every bend and curve, every secret panel of the flesh. This is how everything is done, running off with someone who has only known the miserable world as a crazy, obscene thing, incessant, without an observable end. This is my ode to the panoply of the brain, the bell and whistle, click and buzz that we want to comprehend, like the universe trying to understand itself with each of its infinite parts, all of its wings. Where were we? Yes, I remember. Somewhere inside, wondering how any of this could be real, but I suppose you know. You have always known. Righty then. Yeah, here we go. I've always been fascinated by insects. And as a matter of fact, I've actually completed an entire collection about insects, every single poem about bugs. But this is from We Were Birds. This one's actually about bees, called Swarm. Well, it's a little more than bees, but I think you'll get that. Bees find themselves among the blossoms, exhilarating air, tiny souls in a heaven of pollen. They seem to be collecting dust from the sun, photons heavy on their legs, furious on the wing. Together, a small black cloud hovering and swaying, almost a shadow without a body to throw it down. Someone stands nearby, dreaming of honey, the sweet taste of spring and summer, a hint of autumn, chasing the dust of whirlwinds and unexpected fog. The honey god waits in the field, his skin bronzed by the light, each piece of his body touched by nectar and spat upon, a buzzing in his ears, a faraway sound, a trickling tinnitus. A stream washing stones such a long time they become nothing more than nothing. The honey god's muscles knot and twist across his naked form. The bees gathered above his head, a living crown. Twigs and wildflowers around his waist. He glistens as he moves, listens for thunder, feeling for the possibility of rain, but no, the sun keeps throwing itself into the branches and leaves and thickets, and when night finally closes upon us, the hive goes quiet, humming, with bodies so close they breathe each other's breath, they sing each other's names. And back to birds, here we go. The avian problem. Robins and jays and starlings take every cherry from the mangled tree, its black and decrepit limbs tangled into bundles of nerves like an aviary noisy with 100 wars. Strawberries are safe beside the shed. We can't even begin to guess why. The raspberries are low enough to cover. On the new vines, the berries are larger, darker, sweeter. This contradicts everything we remember last year, the year before that, and the year before that. A neighbor tells us in the skin-warm afternoon that when he shingled the roof, a wren or a sparrow attacked him. He says birds go crazy, especially the small ones trying to protect their young. Hell, he says, we all do. It's gotten so a cat can't even sleep in peace on the front porch. There's always temptation. Even the advantage of wings is never as safe as we think it should be. Birds start pecking holes in the pears. It's never been this bad before. We don't know what to do. We sit in the house and listen, trying to name the culprit, but the wind is too strong, the leaves are too brittle. Squirrels are back in the attic, scaring off pigeons. We are invariably distracted and worried that the world will disappear while we read the evening paper. Above us, great flocks of blackbirds dispense into darkness. Evening is the giant wing of the universe. We will sleep with our hunger and wake in the shadows of trees. All righty. And this is one. When I was a little boy, my mother and grandmother always took my sister and me shopping with them. And of course, you know how little ones are when you go shopping. We like to hide in the clothes racks and that sort of thing. But this one day we were at Kmart, which is no longer in existence. And there was this little boy, and his mother had him in a stroller. And his head was hugely misshapen, very bulbous. And of course, Mom and Grandma said, "Don't stare, don't stare." Mm-hmm. And of course, that was our mantra whenever we went out. If someone looked a little more unusual than we did, we learned, in that case, to look away, which is kind of insulting. And then later in life, as my grandmother got older and I was taking her around shopping, she would always be the one to point out people. "You see what she's wearing? Look how big she is," or that sort of thing. And I kept thinking, "Oh, Grandma." But anyway, this was a true experience that I dwelled upon for many years before I wrote it. It's called "The Boy with the Oversized Head." Sparrows are back, pounding their tired bodies under the rain clouds of migration. 2 of them hit the windows, then sit stunned on the ledge. One finally gets into the house. All of us are frightened. The bird, the family, waving brooms and dish rags up to the ceiling, looking like peasants chasing witches and werewolves into pyres, or perhaps the frantic dance of the 2 religious flailing about the pews, tearing at their hair. We are the same now as when we were children in the department store, hidden from our mother in all those racks of clothing, paisley, houndstooth, and large floral prints that we parted with our fingers. We needed to disappear to see the boy with the oversized head who stared up at the fluorescent specters of light. Everyone looked at him. Everyone thought and whispered words like demon, devil, dangerous. No one knew the word hydrocephalus. that this was just fluid, or that the boy would only live 12 years, tagging along beside his mother as best he could, both of them finding ways to ignore the low voices, the transfixed eyes. No one would know the way she held him at night on her lap, one hand on his knees, the other hidden somewhere behind his back, his large head wobbling against her shoulder so close to her ear that she could listen to the shifting of the water in his skull. No one could know the dreams she'd been having lately. Her hand slips down through the skin and past the bone until her fingers toggle where the brain should be. Her body soaks up the moisture until her baby is normal, not beautiful, not extraordinary, just normal. No, we cannot know this kind of pain, even as we fear the death that this one sparrow portends, even as we open the front door wide as it will go, warm air rushes out as the chill of spring sets in. I thought I might read a couple from the books that are forthcoming. Actually, I have two books forthcoming. I have Bending Light with Bare Hands is coming out probably in early 2004, and Shouting at an Empty House, fingers crossed, by the end of the year. I'm going to read maybe one from each. This one is called Apiary. It's from Bending Light with Bare Hands. Apiary. Purplish blooms, my blazing stars come back stronger every year, massaged by pollinators. But not today. I haven't seen any honeybees take their frenzied turns. A cold, wet spring and a burning start to summer. I'm afraid the worker bees are gone, their queens curled into apostrophes in their hives. I even let white clover spread out through my lawn, these blossoms my attempt at hope, which is something I had as a barefoot child, until one careless step and I was stung, my foot swollen, unable to wear a shoe for a week. But this wasn't my only lesson in pain. There were sweat bees, bumblebees, yellow jackets, hornets. There were wasps that built their paper houses in my open windows during the sweltering ages of childhood when all we had was breezes and fans. I don't walk barefoot across the lawn anymore. I don't bend my elbows or knees without checking for some sign of life. I don't sit at old school bus stops on rainy mornings to learn this is shelter for carpenter bees, mud daubers, deer flies, berry bugs. They write their own apocrypha, their own explanations of the gods pulled from flowers and dew. I've never been so worried about the end of the world as I am right now. Yes, there were warnings, there were signs. I should have listened to the wisdom of my grandparents who knew how to read the turnings of leaves, the songs of birds, which I just realized I don't hear today. When the weather is hot, there are flashes in the sky. My grandmother calls heat lightning. She says it doesn't mean rain. It means the devil is loose in this world, and he's near. Alrighty. Which of these do I want? I think I'll do this shorter one called Round Trip. Of course, Mark had mentioned, and thank you, by the way, for having us here today. It's such a pleasure. When I was in New York, one of my friends, when I got there, said she never got to do all the tourist things, so she had to do some tourist things with me. And one of those was riding the Staten Island ferry back and forth past the Statue of Liberty. Round trip. Waves against the pilings, I boarded the ferry to Staten Island. I wasn't going anywhere, only passing by. My friend told me it was the best way to see her, Lady Liberty, on an overcast afternoon. I thought I could fall in love under those clouds. The scribbled silhouettes of seagulls overhead, the vessel rocked a little while wind clung to the railing, while I watched my friend struggle to light a cigarette. It's been so long ago. All the details create their own fog. I think there was light climbing the statue, highlighting shadows and folds of sculpture. What we talked about, I don't remember. But I'd never felt more like a tourist or an immigrant, in awe of a symbol of hope. We debarked, walked around the empty port, reboarded for the trip back, where we disappeared among the architecture, surrounded, as we were, by water. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dave. Thank you, Dave and Lori. Again, a round of applause for both of them. It's been great to have them here. And please come up. Feel free to visit with them, to purchase their books, and ask them questions. So again, thank you all for coming. And don't miss Sean's wonderful programs coming up here every Tuesday, and then that special week-long Wheeling Reads in early September.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
I don't mean to horn in, but do you remember Harold Vitale? Yes. Harold was a fixture here at these poetry readings for years and years, and he commissioned me to write a poem for him that I never got to finish before he passed. It's okay. Do you mind if I share it with you now?
No, I think that's fine. Yeah.
Great. It's we were sitting right here when he commissioned it. Of course, there was no money involved. He was my high school teacher in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And he still called me Mr. Fahey all these years later. But he started, after a while, if you took Harold's classes, he told you that you were involved, you were a member of the Chester Greenwood Club. There was no process. You were just informed one day that you were a member of the Chester Greenwood Club. And Chester Greenwood was the man that invented earmuffs. Technically didn't invent them, but he was the first person to get a patent for them. So he asked me, and Harold produced a newsletter every year for all of the members of the Chester Greenwood Club. And this went back to 1970. So, like I said, he was always a fixture here, so I thought this would be a good place to honor his memory and share this unfinished poem for him. But I want to say, before I get started, the Greenwood family vigorously disputes my representation of his, the color of his ears here, but it was reported in one news story, so I get to use it. Okay, Chester Greenwood had all-American ears, turning chalk white, beet red, then deep blue, in that order, when the land and sea breezes raced over the Maine border once again, down the mountains past the piers, to see who freezes the pits and ponds first. Worst often comes to worst, and there would be Chester practicing math on his skates, tracing zeros and figure eights, his ears turning motley colored like a jester. He'd whirl and twirl as the winds did swirl, and every boy and every girl had an ear-stinging tease that they would hurl. Chester, ears burning, packed up his pride and stalked home his patriotic ears to hide. As he warmed himself by the fireside, he fiddled and fussed with a bit of farm wire. Invested with inventiveness and desire, Chester toiled with that coil to form a frame to spoil the colds coloring his ears. In all her long years, his grandmother had never heard such a plan from a woman or a man, to fashion, knit, and fit a shield to stop harmful winds and names. But she did as she was asked and sewed a little beaver fur fast around the wire frames. Chester tested the fit and, satisfied, awaited the vindication he was owed as the temperature sank lower and lower as it snowed. The next day was no day for fun. It was like there had never been a sun. Arctic air clung all around, frost heaves swelled the rising ground as Chester shouldered his skates along, ears tightly covered, nothing in the slightest wrong. Upon his arrival, the chapped lips of the skaters gaped in awe. Their watering eyes couldn't believe what they saw. Chester strapped on his skates and stayed on the ice all day while the other skaters were far less bold, waylaid by the wind and cold, lasting only a short while to file home hastily to get warm. He frolicked and laughed good-naturedly as he braved the storm, and the others marveled as they inspected the device, for underneath was his normal-colored ear, free from ice. Word spread like wildfire. People had to hear, thanks to Chester, they no longer had to fear the frost gnawing at their ear. Flatterers sincerely imitate when the idea is right, and soon there were all manner of ear coverings in sight. Though none had the right fit, none stayed right in place. One here fell off the ear, one there flipped over the face. All this enthusiasm for his invention told Chester what he had to do when he applied for and received at the age of 18 U.S. patent number 188,292. Next, Chester identified, engaged, and persuaded each investor, and by the age of 23 had opened the doors of the first champion ear protectors factory. We didn't get it finished, Harold, but we got the factory built. Production can commence. Thanks, Mark. And thank you both. I spent a good hour outside the door of the ladies' restroom in the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum when my wife had altitude sickness out there. Well done, Lori and Dave. I don't know how we don't know each other, brother. I was the director of distance learning at WVU Parkersburg for 5 years. So, yeah, crazy. But well done. Thank you both.
Good, thank you all for coming. Please come up and meet Dave and Lori, and see you next time.
Yeah. I see him here and there. I think my mom took the step for a nap.
Oh, really? I think it was a little more.
That works.